Hey guys, tonight we drift into a meadow where the grass is soft as a quilt and the air smells faintly of clover and rain. The sky isn't quite dark yet, but it's that dreamy twilight where everything looks like it's been painted in watercolor. You step gently, and the hush of evening feels like someone turned the volume down on the whole world. It's peaceful. So peaceful, in fact, that you probably won't survive this story without nodding off halfway through. Which is kind of the point, isn't it? So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you truly enjoy what I do here. And if you feel like sharing, let me know in the comments where you're listening from and what time it is in your part of the world. It's always fun seeing someone in New York say midnight, while someone else in Sydney casually replies lunchtime. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together.
You wander a little deeper into the meadow, and the air has that faint shimmer, like heat rising off a summer road. But this isn't heat. This is the Wind King's breath. A restless sigh rolling across the land. The old folks say the Wind King never really sleeps. He's always shifting, always sneaking through windows and rustling curtains, a nosy neighbor you can't keep out. But tonight feels different. Tonight, his sighs carry a strange rhythm, almost like a heartbeat. Somewhere above you, the clouds are being pulled into long strands, spun like sugar on a carnival stick. That's his handiwork too. Folklorists can't agree if the Wind King was meant to be a god in his own right or just a personification of nature, a poetic way for villagers to say, well, the crops blew down again, thanks weather. Either way, he's been around for as long as anyone can remember. One old legend says he once carved whole valleys with a single exhale, which sounds impressive until you remember that most of us can't even blow out all the birthday candles on the first try. As you pause, you hear a rustling, not of leaves, but of wings. A small sparrow hops into your path. His feathers are slightly ruffled, like someone who rolled out of bed 5 minutes ago and decided, yeah, this look works. He chirps once, then twice, and then, you swear, it sounds like he laughs. A laugh so tiny and quick you almost mistake it for the squeak of a door hinge. Now, sparrows have always had a reputation in folklore. Some cultures thought of them as humble companions of farmers, little winged foragers that symbolize simplicity and home. In Japanese tales, sparrows are sometimes gifts of good fortune, or punishments if you're greedy. One curious fact? In medieval Europe, sparrows were thought to be symbols of lust. Yes, lust. Which is a bold choice for such a small bird. Imagine being 3 inches tall and still being typecast as the Casanova of the animal kingdom. This particular sparrow, though, has something sharper in his eyes. You can tell right away he's not just hopping around for breadcrumbs. He's listening to the Wind King's restless sighs, and with every gust, he tilts his head as though saying, "Is that all you've got?" The meadow quiets for a moment. You almost feel the world holding its breath, like everyone knows something is about to happen. The sparrow flutters up to a branch, sings one quick trill, and the sound cuts through the night like a joke whispered in church. A joke you're not supposed to laugh at. High above, the sigh in the air sharpens into a rumble. The Wind King is stirring. And somehow you get the feeling he doesn't like being laughed at by something that weighs less than a sandwich.
The sparrow tilts his head at you, as if to check whether you've noticed how smug he just sounded. Then he belts out another note, this time louder, sharper, a chirp that somehow carries a hint of sarcasm. It's the avian equivalent of someone clapping back on Twitter. You almost expect him to hashtag it wind problems. The meadow air vibrates. A gust curls through the grass, pushing the blades flat and lifting the scent of wild thyme into the twilight. You brace yourself, as though the meadow itself is bracing, but the sparrow, he just fluffs his feathers, hops once, and chirps again, like a stand-up comic, daring the heckler to keep talking. Sparrows, historically, have always been underestimated. The Romans considered them nothing special,
more nuisance than noble. Yet, in Chinese folklore, a sparrow's song could be a blessing, a whisper of happiness sent from the heavens. Folklorists argue even today whether sparrows in European tales were meant as tricksters or moral teachers. It's funny how humans project personalities onto birds. We see their twitchy movements and think nervous, or hear their chatter and think gossipy. It says more about us than them. But tonight, this sparrow is leaning fully into comedian. He strings together chirps in a rhythm that almost sounds like a tune. You recognize it suddenly. Not a melody you know, but it has the cadence of a teasing nursery rhyme, the kind children sing in circles when they're about to mock someone bigger than them. You imagine the sparrow leading a whole chorus of meadow creatures in chanting, "The Wind King can't even blow out a candle." The breeze stiffens, prickling your skin. The Wind King answers with a low, rolling growl that whips through the trees. A branch snaps somewhere in the distance. If the meadow had a soundtrack, this would be the bass drop. The sparrow, unbothered, hops closer to you, chirps once more, and then, oh, this is bold, imitates the sound of the wind itself. Not perfectly, but enough. A tiny whistle, high-pitched, like a child mocking their parent. And you swear the bird's chest puffs as if daring the king, "Come at me, bro." There's something delightful in watching a creature so small poke fun at a force of nature. It reminds you of the Greek tale of Aesop's fly. Yes, the fly, boasting to a lion that it had no fear of claws, only to win by buzzing endlessly until the lion gave up. Scholars debate whether that fable was a satire of human arrogance or a simple encouragement for the underdog. Either way, the sparrow feels like the fly's spiritual cousin. You chuckle under your breath. The sparrow glances at you with what you swear is approval, as if you've just been recruited into his peanut gallery. You're in on the joke now, which of course means you're also in on the risk. Because far above, the clouds are nodding into strange shapes, like fists, like cheeks puffed with air. The Wind King is listening. He is not amused. And still, the sparrow sings. The clouds shift and darken, gathering in long, sweeping strokes like brush marks across the twilight sky. The Wind King exhales once, low and steady, and the meadow bends beneath the weight of his mood. You can feel it in your chest, that strange, hollow sensation when a storm is about to break. Most people would take cover, maybe hide under a roof, or at least pretend to be brave while secretly clutching their umbrella like a sword. You, though, you're just standing there in the open, watching a sparrow troll a deity of air. The Wind King's voice rumbles through the atmosphere, not words exactly, but a deep vibration that your bones interpret as meaning. "Respect me." It's the kind of sound that would normally send villagers scrambling indoors to latch their shutters. Old songs say that when the Wind King truly spoke, entire forests leaned closer just to listen. And yet tonight, he's reduced to growling at a bird that barely weighs more than your left shoe. The sparrow responds by flapping his wings once, twice, like someone giving sarcastic applause at the back of a theater. The timing is impeccable. You can't help but laugh, though it comes out nervously, like laughing at a teacher's joke that wasn't really a joke, but you're hoping it'll save you from detention. Now, folklorists often debate what kings of the wind represent. Some say they're cautionary figures, reminders that nature is indifferent and absolute. Others argue they were meant to symbolize tyrants, rulers who blow hot and cold, unpredictable and feared, their people powerless against their moods. A curious tidbit? In some Norse traditions, wind spirits were depicted as horses galloping across the sky, which, honestly, makes the Wind King's frustration here funnier. Imagine a massive celestial horse losing an argument to a bird small enough to nest in a teacup. The gusts grow sharper. Grass blades slap against your legs. The sparrow clings to his branch like a professional surfer riding a wave, feathers pressed tight, eyes gleaming with something that looks dangerously close to delight. He doesn't just survive the Wind King's roar, he thrives on it.
Then, as if to really twist the knife, the sparrow launches into a fresh tune. This one lilts upward, then cuts off suddenly, like he's imitating someone running out of breath mid-sentence. You realize with a start, he's mocking the Wind King's own sighing. The air stills in a dramatic pause. You've seen comedians land good punchlines, but this is different. This is nature itself hesitating, trying to decide if it should laugh or lash out. You whisper under your breath, "Buddy, you're really pushing it." The sparrow tilts his head. Maybe he heard you, maybe he agrees, or maybe, just maybe, he knows something you don't, that there are more ways to win a battle than brute strength. And somewhere high above, the Wind King inhales sharply. The next move is coming.
The air swells as though the whole sky is filling its lungs. A pressure builds in your ears, and the meadow leans sideways under an invisible weight. This is no casual breeze now. It's the kind of gust that topples scarecrows and sends laundry sailing 3 towns over. The Wind King is awake, and he's clearly not in the mood for small talk. But the sparrow? He barely blinks. He's perched on his little branch like it's the VIP balcony at a comedy club, and the stage is his. He lets out a crisp chirp, quick and playful, like a heckler, daring the headliner to come back with something clever. And for the first time tonight, you realize the sparrow isn't just mocking, he's performing. This is theater, feathery and fearless. In fairy tales, boldness is often reserved for princes slaying dragons or maidens sneaking out of towers. But here, it belongs to a bird no bigger than your palm. Folklorists often say sparrows symbolize resilience, their tiny bodies surviving in the harshest cities, their nests hidden in rafters and cracks. One little-known tidbit? In parts of old Russia, people believed sparrows could carry the souls of the dead to the afterlife, which suddenly makes this sparrow's fearlessness make more sense. What's a storm to a bird that's rumored to guide souls beyond it? The Wind King exhales with force. The gust rips through the grass, flattening whole swaths of meadow in one mighty sweep. You stumble, your hair whipping across your face like wet spaghetti, and you're certain this is the moment the sparrow gets blown into next week. But instead, he leaps into the air, spins once, twice, pretending to be tossed around, then lands squarely on a stone just inches from your feet. It's pure theater. He fakes his own defeat, only to reappear smugly right in front of you as though saying, "Ta-da! Still here." You can't help but clap once under your breath. The timing is just too good. The sparrow cocks his head as if taking a bow. High above, the clouds churn, unable to decide whether to roll with laughter or roar with rage. Scholars today still argue over whether these kinds of stories, where tiny creatures defy massive forces, were meant as satire or simply bedtime entertainment for children who loved rooting for the underdog. Maybe it's both. Maybe we just love watching arrogance get punctured by something smaller, sharper, and much funnier. The sparrow chirps again, wings twitching, eyes bright. He's not done. He wants round 2. And you, standing in the meadow, feel like you've just been roped into ringside seats for the strangest boxing match in folklore. A sparrow with sarcasm in one corner and the literal atmosphere in the other. The bell hasn't rung yet, but you can feel it. The real contest is about to begin.
The bell, metaphorical as it is, rings with the next great inhale. The Wind King gathers himself, and suddenly the meadow roars to life. Tall grasses bow so low you could almost mistake them for worshippers. Trees sway like dancers at a rock concert, limbs flailing in awkward rhythm. And you're just trying not to get smacked in the face by a rogue dandelion fluff moving at 40 miles per hour. The sparrow launches upward into the chaos. His wings beat furiously, but not with panic, with purpose. He weaves between the gusts as though he knows the choreography, darting left when the wind pushes right, rising higher when the air dips low. It's like watching someone play dodgeball with the sky itself. You almost want to whistle encouragement, but given how thin the air feels in your chest, you'd probably just squeak like a deflating balloon. The Wind King tries again, harder this time. A booming gale tears across the meadow, flattening flowers and shaking loose a flurry of seeds. The world blurs in motion, yet the sparrow somehow makes it look like a game. He tucks his wings, plummets just before the wind can toss him, then snaps them open to land gracefully on a broken fence post. It's less near disaster and more circus act. Folklorists sometimes describe these confrontations between small tricksters and mighty rulers as teaching tools. They told listeners, brains beat brawn, wit wins over wrath. A quirky historical tidbit, in some Persian stories, sparrows were nicknamed windbiters because people swore they could actually peck the air in protest when gales blew too hard. Tonight, you're swearing you're watching proof. The Wind King huffs again. The gale howls, and for a second you lose sight of the sparrow entirely. Your stomach drops. Did he finally get swept away? But no. Out of the whirling grass, the bird hops into view at your feet. Feathers only slightly ruffled. He looks up at you, chest puffed, eyes gleaming with that same cheeky defiance. It's almost comical. Imagine the god of the skies trying to squash an insect with all his might, only for the insect to land back on his sandwich, chewing smugly. That's your sparrow. Tiny, unbothered, and apparently running the show. The Wind King is powerful, that much is clear. But the sparrow has just proven he's not going anywhere. Not yet. And as the gale subsides into an uneasy hush, you realize this was just the opening round.
The meadow lies in a strange calm now, like the world is holding its breath after laughing too hard. A few petals float down from a nearby thistle, landing in your hair. You brush them away, trying to look composed. But the sparrow notices and chirps as if mocking your attempt at dignity. Great, roasted by a bird. He struts forward on the fence post like it's a stage, wings slightly spread for dramatic effect. Then he does the most absurd thing. He lets himself topple backward into the air, flutters clumsily, and lands belly first in the grass. For a second, you panic. Did he actually lose? But no. He pops back up, shakes off a bit of pollen, and looks at you with what can only be described as comedic timing. It's a fake-out, a feathered pratfall. You can't help but laugh. Somewhere Buster Keaton would be proud. This is his trick. Make it look like he's defeated, then reveal he's still standing. It's not brute survival, it's theater designed to irritate his rival. And judging from the low hiss now slinking across the meadow, the Wind King is indeed irritated. You remember old stories villagers used to tell, how the Wind King carved out valleys and lifted seas, how his temper shaped landscapes. Historians still argue if those myths grew from genuine religious worship or just poetic ways to explain natural disasters. One curious tidbit: some ancient sailors blamed sudden calm seas not on lack of wind, but on a sparrow stealing the king's breath. They would toss crumbs overboard as tribute, a sort of air tax paid in breadcrumbs. The sparrow before you seems well aware of that legend. He hops closer, puffing his chest like a prize fighter. Then, in the voice only slightly louder than a sneeze, he chirps what sounds like a riddle. You can't understand the words, but the rhythm feels teasing, like someone asking, what can blow a house down, but not a feather? The Wind King rustles uneasily, swirling the meadow's edges, but he doesn't answer. Maybe he can't. Maybe the sparrow's joke is too clever, or maybe it's one of those riddles with no answer at all, like, why do socks disappear in the dryer? Some mysteries remain eternal. The sparrow, satisfied with the silence, takes a bow, a literal dip forward with wings out. He has the crowd, and the crowd is basically you, some bewildered wildflowers, and a highly disgruntled deity of weather. Not bad for a 5-inch showman.
Above, the clouds gather heavier, bruised with shadow. The Wind King may not be beaten, but you sense he's unsettled, and the Sparrow knows it too. This round didn't belong to the storm. It belonged to the feathers.
The hush in the meadow thickens, as though the earth itself wants to hear what happens next. You glance up at the sky, and the clouds are restless, tumbling over one another in long gray curls. The Wind King doesn't vanish in defeat. He simmers. His sigh rolls low across the land, rattling the reeds at the water's edge like spoons clinking in a glass. It's less rage now, and more a kind of wounded pride. The sparrow hops up onto a thistle stalk and shakes his wings, as if dusting off invisible metals. Then, quite unhelpfully, he lets out a chirp that sounds suspiciously like a snicker. You could almost subtitle it, "That all you got?" You've heard tales of the Wind King before. Farmers swore he sculpted their fields, knocking trees aside to open clearings for villages. Children were told he once carved the Alps themselves, his breath scraping valleys into stone like fingernails dragging across ice. Some stories even claimed he could blow new stars into the night sky, scattering sparks from his mouth like embers. Folklorists, of course, still argue whether he was a god or simply a poetic way to say, "It's really windy, brace the roof." But one odd little tidbit. In certain Scandinavian tales, the wind was called the invisible plow, credited for tilling fields before the sowing of crops. Not exactly terrifying, more like an uninvited farmhand. The sparrow seems to know all these old legends, or at least he behaves like he does. He puffs himself up and sings another tune. But this one is different. It isn't mocking, not quite. It's playful, yes, but woven with strange tones that almost echo the sighs in the sky. It's as if he's mimicking the Wind King's voice, but lighter, sweeter, like a parody ballad sung in falsetto. You realize with a jolt, the sparrow isn't just teasing. He's challenging the Wind King to a duet. The air shifts uneasily. The first verse belongs to the sparrow, a trill, high and cheeky. The answer comes in a sigh, rolling low and heavy. Back and forth it goes, bird song and breeze, whistle and whisper. You half expect to see musical notes floating between them, like an old cartoon. And for a fleeting moment, you catch it. The Wind King faltering. The rhythm of his sighs stumbles uncertain. The sparrow has thrown him off beat. You chuckle, though quietly this time, because laughter here feels like joining the rebellion. You're watching history bend, not in the way of mighty empires or grand battles, but in the ridiculous spectacle of a sparrow tripping up the lungs of the earth. Somewhere in the swaying meadow, a daisy tilts its head toward the sparrow, and you could swear the flowers are listening too.
The duet lingers, playful yet charged, like a fencing match where one fighter is laughing the whole time and the other's sweating through his armor. The sparrow trills a sharp little note, and the Wind King answers with a long sigh that rattles your bones. The back and forth continues until the sparrow abruptly changes tempo, releasing a string of chirps so fast it's like someone mashing random keys on a piano. The Wind King falters again. His reply comes late, clumsy, as if he's chasing the sparrow's rhythm but can't quite catch it. You can almost hear the bird chuckle. It's the sound of a prankster who knows he's landed the punchline. Then the sparrow does something unexpected. He pauses, he hops closer to you, tilts his head, and belts out 3 deliberate notes. They sound oddly like a question. You don't understand the language, of course, but the breeze carries the riddle into your bones. What is everywhere, yet no one can hold? What breaks ships, yet bends to reeds?
The Wind King growls. The meadow vibrates. But there's no clear answer. You suspect that's the point. The sparrow's puzzle isn't meant to be solved. It's meant to remind the Wind King that even he, mighty as he is bound by riddles of his own nature. Folklore is full of these moments. Trickster animals, foxes, hares, even spiders, win by forcing their opponents into questions without answers. Scholars still debate whether these tales were subtle critiques of authority or just comedic relief for listeners tired of hearing about unbeatable kings. A quirky tidbit: in some West African traditions, Anansi the spider wins contests by setting riddles so twisted that even spirits give up. Tonight, the sparrow channels that same energy with feathers instead of 8 legs. The air trembles as if the Wind King is thinking. A gust rustles the meadow in short bursts, like syllables of an unfinished sentence. He's trying to reply, but finds himself tongue-tied. The sparrow waits, wings twitching, eyes gleaming like twin sparks. Then comes the payoff. The sparrow chirps once. Bright, final, decisive. A victory bell rung by the smallest of beaks. Above you, the Wind King sighs, not with fury this time, but with something closer to resignation. His answer has been stolen before he could even form it. You exhale too, realizing you'd been holding your breath. The sparrow, tiny and smug, has just outwitted the ruler of the air in front of your very eyes. The sky rumbles like a drum reluctantly played. You glance upward, expecting lightning or thunder, but instead the clouds just pulse with a dull gray glow. The Wind King is stewing, no longer furious, but not exactly graceful in defeat either. It's the vibe of someone who just lost an argument online and is typing an angry follow-up reply, only to delete it halfway through. Then, quite suddenly, the air shivers with the sound of distant thunder. The Wind King is bluffing. You can feel it. The sparrow knows it too. The tiny bird hops in a small circle on the fence post, as if pacing, then belts out a chirp that sounds rising into a squeaky imitation of thunder itself. Not scary thunder, more like the sound effect a child would make with their cheeks puffed out. You burst into laughter before you can stop yourself. It's ridiculous. A sparrow mocking thunder like it's auditioning for a cartoon voiceover role. The Wind King answers with another grumble, but this time it's weaker, stretched thin, like someone faking a yawn to look intimidating. Folklorists tell us storms in myths often stood in for battles, the clash of gods, or the rage of spirits. Historians still argue whether these tales were about real weather events, giant tempests remembered as divine temper tantrums, or if they were simply narrative metaphors for conflict. A curious tidbit: some old Germanic traditions claimed sparrows could sense approaching storms and warn farmers with their erratic flight patterns. Tonight, though, the sparrow isn't warning of a storm, he's ending one. The meadow shifts into an eerie stillness. The grass rises slowly, no longer pinned flat. A cluster of daisies trembles upright, their petals catching what little moonlight remains. The sparrow puffs his feathers and lets out a final note, a soft trill that sounds suspiciously like a lullaby. And just like that, the storm unravels. The rumble fades, the thunder swallows itself, and the clouds roll away, sulking toward the horizon like children sent to bed too early. The Wind King, for all his might, has been hushed into quiet. You stand there, blinking in the sudden calm. Did you just watch a sparrow sing a storm into silence? Apparently so. And now, instead of thunder, the only sound left is the steady beat of your own heart and the gentle rustling of grass that dares to stand tall again. The sparrow, smug as ever, gives you a look that says,
told you he was bluffing."
The calm that follows feels almost unreal, as if the meadow itself is breathing again after holding its lungs tight against the storm. You notice how quickly life returns to it. The grass lifts itself upright, blades shimmering faintly in the dim starlight. Flowers straighten their stems with the grace of dancers fixing their posture. And in the middle of it all, the sparrow hops proudly, as if accepting applause. One patch of wildflowers seems especially eager. Tall stalks of lavender lean toward the sparrow, their tips bobbing lightly like they're bowing. A cluster of daisies stretches its petals so wide you'd swear they were smiling. You half expect the meadow to burst into a full standing ovation. It's absurd, but then again, you've already seen a sparrow mock a thunderclap, so absurd might as well be the new normal. The Wind King doesn't speak. For once, silence is his reply. That alone feels stranger than thunder. The sparrow, sensing his triumph, puffs up and lets out a triumphant chirp, but this time it's softer, warmer, more like a gentle reassurance than a mocking laugh. Somehow, it's both victory cry and bedtime song. Folklore often treats sparrows as humble background characters, small, common, overlooked. Yet history says otherwise. In ancient Greece, sparrows were symbols of love and devotion, sacred to Aphrodite. In parts of medieval Europe, they were thought to represent peasants standing against the arrogance of kings. Scholars debate whether this symbolism was deliberate or just coincidence, but either way, the little bird has long stood for resilience. And here tonight, in this meadow, resilience looks like feathers and a voice too small to measure, standing tall against the sky. A breeze brushes your cheek, gentle now, almost apologetic. The sparrow flicks his wings as if conducting it, and the meadow, bending and swaying in unison, seems to agree with him. There's a new rhythm in the air, not the chaos of a storm, but the steady harmony of nature choosing to settle down again. You smile despite yourself. You've seen leaders falter and storms bluff, but rarely have you witnessed flowers themselves lean in admiration for a bird that weighs less than a deck of playing cards. The sparrow hops closer, tilts his head at you, and chirps as if to say, "Your turn to clap."
The sparrow's chirp lingers in the air, almost like a drum roll waiting for the next act. And then something astonishing happens. The Wind King, that proud, booming sovereign of the skies, hesitates. For the first time, his breath doesn't surge forward. Instead, it shivers, stutters, and fades into the stillness like a candle flame about to wink out. You tilt your head back, scanning the sky. It feels odd, doesn't it, to see a force that usually stomps around the heavens with hurricane boots suddenly standing there in socks, not quite sure how to move? The clouds, once fierce with motion, hang limp like curtains forgotten on their rod. The stars peek through timidly, their twinkle a kind of gossip. Did you see that? The Wind King blinked. The sparrow, naturally, seizes the moment. He hops up onto a fence post, puffing his chest so proudly it's a miracle he doesn't topple backward. His song drifts upward, sweet and mocking, and though you can't understand the words, you get the message loud and clear. What's wrong, big guy? Cat got your thunder? Folklorists have long argued whether trickster tales, like this sparrow's, exist just to make us laugh, or if they serve as quiet rebellions. Some scholars suggest that these stories allowed common folk to imagine victory over forces they couldn't actually control: kings, storms, hunger. Others argue the tales were warnings, that wit alone could save you if you kept it sharp. Either way, you're living inside one of those stories now, and the punchline is about to land. Because the Wind King does falter. His next breath is shaky, more sigh than roar. Imagine a politician trying to recover from tripping on stage. Yes, technically still powerful, but that single wobble is all anyone will remember. And tonight, that wobble belongs to him. The meadow hums with anticipation, as if waiting for the final vote to be cast. And somehow, impossibly, the sparrow looks less like a bird and more like a crowned champion. Tiny, but undeniable. You can almost hear the earth whisper, balance is shifting.
The Wind King hovers above, his presence no longer thundering with the confidence of an untouchable monarch. Instead, there's a tremor in the night air, a hesitation that you feel in your bones. The once mighty gusts now drift as hesitant breezes, like someone fiddling with a broken fan. And below him, perched on that weathered fence post, the sparrow seems impossibly small, yet impossibly unshaken. The bird tilts his head, his beady eyes glinting with a wisdom that feels older than the stars. His voice, when it comes, is not a chirp this time, but a low, deliberate melody that curls into your ears like a lullaby threaded with steel. He speaks, not in words you recognize, but in meanings you can feel. And the meaning is this: let us end this, not with fury, but with balance. You shift slightly in the meadow grass, wondering if this is how treaties are born, not from scrolls and signatures, but from one party finally realizing they've run out of breath. The Wind King, for all his roaring, seems to pause and actually listen. That in itself feels historic, like watching a king who's only known how to shout finally lower his voice to a whisper. Historians often note how ancient pacts between mortals and forces of nature were seen as sacred. Offerings of bread, wine, or even songs were made to winds, rivers, or storms in exchange for mercy or safety. But here, no golden goblets or temple rituals exist, just a sparrow offering his wit as a peace treaty. The Wind King rumbles, his voice uncertain. "What could you possibly give me, little feather, that I do not already take?" And the sparrow answers with a flit of wings, almost a shrug. His song threads into the meadow, carrying the idea, I can give you cleverness, I can give you stories, I can give you a reason to be remembered, not for destruction, but for restraint. It's a curious bargain, isn't it? Scholars have always debated whether such exchanges in folklore reflect humanity's yearning to tame chaos. Was it belief in true negotiation, or just a bedtime fantasy spun to soothe anxious hearts before storms? No one really knows. But here, under this night sky, the deal feels real. The Wind King exhales one long, low sigh, like a tired man finally loosening his belt after a feast. The sparrow bows his tiny head, not out of servitude, but as acknowledgement. A pact, sealed not with ink or fire, but with silence and trust. The meadow softens around you, every blade of grass leaning into the peace. Somewhere far off, a night owl hoots, as if stamping the agreement with approval. The silence that follows the pact is the kind you don't get in cities anymore. It's the silence of nature holding its breath, the kind where even the crickets pause like they've been told, "Shh, this is important." You notice the air shift, the wind no longer a tyrant's roar, but a companion's sigh. It drifts gently through the meadow, brushing your face with the softness of a hand smoothing a wrinkled bedsheet. The sparrow hops down from the fence post, wings flicking like punctuation at the end of a long sentence. He circles once in the air and lands near your shoulder. Not too close because boundaries matter even in fairy tales, but close enough that you feel trusted. It's like when someone slides into the seat next to you on a bus. Not invasive, just quietly reassuring. Strange, isn't it? The bird seems to say in his glance, the loudest storms can be hushed by the smallest song. It's a line you might scribble in a notebook if you were a poet, except you're not, and besides, who brings a notebook to a showdown with a storm god? Still, you tuck it into memory. Historically, sparrows have always been symbols of resilience. In some cultures, they represent the souls of common folk, those who endure quietly, unseen but essential. Roman soldiers, for instance, used to think sparrows carried messages of love and loyalty from Venus herself. But here, tonight, the sparrow isn't Cupid's delivery service. He's a negotiator. The type who probably skips law school and just shows up to the United Nations with feathers slightly ruffled, winning arguments with charm. The Wind King lingers overhead, no longer towering like a tyrant, but drifting like a cloud that isn't sure if it wants to rain. You notice his form growing less defined, his edges blurring into the night. It's as if agreeing to peace has cost him his shape. Maybe that's what happens when a ruler gives up conquest. They dissolve a little. But what remains is gentler, more human. Folklorists argue about endings like this. Some say the Wind King would have been banished forever, locked in a mountain or trapped inside a bottle, classical punishment for mischief-making forces of nature. Others argue he'd become part of the natural cycle, his fury absorbed into calmer breezes, reminding people that storms needn't be feared, only respected. You're not sure which version this is. All you know is that the meadow feels livable again. You lie back, your body pressing into the earth, and watch the stars. They seem brighter now, as though the sky itself has unclenched its fists. The sparrow sings a soft tune, not of triumph, but of continuation. Life doesn't end with peace. It moves on, softer, slower, like finally switching the washing machine from heavy-duty spin to gentle rinse. And you, nestled in the grass, feel your breath sinking with the sparrow's song, with the steady hum of a world that for once isn't trying to blow you away.
You wake. Well, wake is generous. It's more like you surface briefly from the warm quilt of drowsiness to find the meadow has shifted again. Not physically, but atmospherically. Where once there was tension and storm clouds plotting in the corners of the sky, there's now an after-party calm. The air smells faintly of rain without ever having rained, like the Wind King left behind his cologne as a peace offering. The sparrow is perched on a crooked branch nearby, preening his feathers with that smug little look only birds can pull off. It's the same vibe as someone smoothing down their suit after winning a courtroom case. You can almost hear him muttering, "Not bad for a creature everyone ignores until they steal your sandwich crumbs." The meadow itself seems to sigh in relief. Wildflowers lean toward one another, as if gossiping about what just happened. The brook hums at a lower pitch, no longer fighting against invisible gusts. Even the clouds drift slower, more like napping whales than restless cattle. Everything exudes that magical, post-trauma calm you only get after a family argument where someone finally apologized, even if you're not sure they meant it. And here you are, part of it. No title, no wings, no crown. Just someone lying in the grass, oddly welcomed into the sparrow's small kingdom. You realize that's the real miracle here. Not the storm ending, but the way the smallest creature opened the door for you to stand inside his story. There's an old tidbit of folklore about sparrows. Sailors once believed they carried the souls of drowned men safely to heaven. Some even tattooed sparrows on their skin, hoping to be guided home. Strange, then, how fitting it feels to see this little bird guiding not sailors, but a storm, steering fury into gentleness. Folklorists debate whether that myth was about literal birds or symbolic faith, but tonight you don't need an answer. You can see both at once, flesh and feather, symbol and song. You tilt your head, listening. The sparrow's tune has changed. It's softer now, threaded with pauses, almost like he's composing a lullaby for the world. And maybe, in a way, he is. The Wind King, you notice, is nowhere in sight. He hasn't vanished exactly. He's become presence without body, woven into the breeze that cools your cheek and ruffles the grass. His voice is gone, but his echo remains. A reminder, not a threat. It's in this in-between, this hush, that you feel the lesson settling. power doesn't always end in victory or defeat. Sometimes it dissolves into understanding, like sugar in tea. You can't fish it out again, but you can taste the difference. Your eyes grow heavy, and the sparrow, as if on cue, hops closer. He doesn't speak, thankfully, because that would be way too Disney at this point, but the glance he gives you feels like a benediction. A tiny, feathery priest, with no incense, only song. The meadow hums with that lullaby of wind, earth, and sparrow, and you, lucky wanderer, are folded into its rhythm. The sparrow's song drifts into something that barely qualifies as melody, more like a memory of sound, a hum so faint it seems to come from the earth itself. You lie there in the meadow, listening, feeling the ground cradle your back as though it has been waiting for you to rest here all along. The Wind King does not return. Or perhaps he never truly left. Perhaps he is now only the gentle swells of night air, brushing your skin the way a mother might draw a blanket over a child. The meadow no longer holds the tension of a battlefield. Instead, it feels like the aftermath of a feast. Candles burned low, laughter fading to murmurs, chairs pushed back as the night takes its time unwinding. Your sparrow friend ruffles his feathers once more, satisfied. Not triumphant, not boastful, just a quiet, grounded confidence, the sort of assurance only the small and underestimated ever master. You think back to how this tale began, a little bird daring to stand against the storm. Ridiculous, impossible. And yet here you are, gazing at a sky cleared not by force, but by wit and persistence. It's the kind of story that has lived 1,000 lives in the mouths of storytellers. In one telling, the sparrow is a trickster. In another, a guardian. Some versions say he banished the Wind King forever. Others claim he became a star, twinkling above fields so travelers could always find their way. Scholars still argue over which version came first, which culture seeded the tale, whether it began as a moral fable or as an explanation for some seasonal wind. But out here, in this hush, those arguments feel less important than the way the story sits inside you, warm, steady, and oddly reassuring. The sparrow tilts his head toward you. For a moment, it feels as though he's waiting for you to add your verse to his song. You don't, of course. You're not about to start chirping like a karaoke bird. But you do smile, and the smile feels like enough. Night thickens around the meadow, drawing you deeper into its quiet fold. Shadows stretch long and soft, like ribbons of velvet over the grass. The stars begin to gather, timid at first, then more boldly, their light pricking through the sky. You realize the story has not so much ended as settled, like a blanket falling into place. And you are its witness, its dreamer, the one who will carry it forward in whispers and thoughts, maybe even in sleep. And now the sparrow's song fades even further into something softer than silence. The meadow grows dim, the grass leaning gently as though swayed by the slow breathing of the earth itself. Your body sinks into that same rhythm, steady, peaceful, unhurried. Each breath you take is like a tide rolling in, then drifting back again, smoothing over every sharp edge of thought. The air feels cooler, calmer, like a soft blanket that has been warmed by moonlight. Even the stars above seem to blink slower, their light stretching into long, drowsy sighs across the sky. The sparrow hops once more upon his branch, his feathers puffing into a perfect little ball. He is at rest now, and so are you. His song, once sharp and clever, has melted into the very air, so that you no longer hear it. You simply feel it, stitched gently into the wind that strokes your cheek. Time itself seems to unravel here. Minutes slip loose, melting into one another, leaving you with only the comfort of stillness. No storms, no kings, no riddles. Just a meadow that waits, quiet and eternal, and a night sky that leans close as if to shelter you beneath its vast wings. And as your eyes grow heavier, it becomes easy, so very easy, to imagine that you are part of the story now, a quiet figure in a tale of wit and wind, drifting into sleep as the sparrow's song carries you deeper and deeper. So let go, let the night hold you, let the last notes of the sparrow's lullaby weave around you like threads of silver. You are safe, you are calm, and you are home.